recording from here since it's recording.
All right, well, I've never recorded to the cloud server before, and I might have to be the one to retrieve it, but that's fine. I can go find it.
I'm gonna record it from Camtasia as well, so it's gonna record. Yeah, it's fine. It's recording from things.
Your audio is a little choppy. Are there any other browsers you can close or other apps you can close out of?
Hold on. This thing is such a pain. Yeah, I don't know why it's like that.
It's just like slightly choppy, almost like your internet's a little bit slow.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think there's like something wrong with my Wi-Fi, but is it really bad?
It's actually not too bad right now.
Okay.
It's doable, yeah.
All right. All right, so it's recording now, and I don't know, how should we start this off?
Well, I think it will fit the best on your channel. So you'll want to introduce the topic, allow us to introduce ourselves, and then we'll launch into the conversation. If you want me to, I can set up the conversation really well by just restating that Facebook status that you commented on, and then we can kind of flow from there. You want to do that? Okay.
Your audio is a little choppy as well. It's like cutting out and has this weird static effect sometimes, but maybe it's gonna.
All right, I'll close out any other windows I have.
I'll do the same. Okay.
Okay. So I would say go ahead and start whenever you want, Mike.
So do you have that Facebook post?
Yeah. I have it.
So, all right. So I know your channel. What's your name again?
Kyra. I'm Kyra.
And the audio is completely out now. I can't even hear anything now.
I can.
I can hear.
All right. So I'm here with Robert from Existence First and Kyra. I don't know if you have a YouTube channel.
Kyra. It's Kyra. And I actually do have a YouTube channel, but I don't know the name of it. So surprise. But yeah, maybe I can figure it out. So
We'll put it in the comments of the video.
yeah.
There's definitely something wrong with my internet, I think. Oh boy. All right. So, I was reading that post you made on Facebook. Do you think you can read it out?
Yeah. Yes, because that kind of inspired this conversation that we're about to have. So I wrote a status the other day that said, it's funny how formal education just makes you memorize things, but the minute you try to learn something that's meaningful, such as a new skill or a new behavior, all of a sudden you encounter an obstacle called the ego. And the ego is never challenged in elementary school or high school because you were taking in information and facts from the outside. You weren't growing and evolving from the inside. And after I wrote that, there were a few comments. You commented that the education system was the biggest problem in America, and we got into a discussion about that, right? And you contacted me and you wanted to have a video chat, which is great. That's the reason we're here. And when you asked if I knew anyone who would be a good addition to that conversation, I immediately thought of my friend Kyra, because she is one of the people that I would consider aware of the value of the human spirit. And that, to me, is really where this conversation is coming from, at least the comments that I was making when I made those comments about the education system. And then last thing, you sent me, Michael, an essay that you had written on the education system. So I think that a lot of the videos you produce do relate strongly to this topic of education and what's the best education we can give the youth of the planet. So I'd like to just turn over to you and then have you kind of ask these questions that you would want to facilitate this discussion.
Okay, so yeah, that whole post you made on Facebook, that definitely prompted me to think about this topic again, because it's something I've been thinking about for quite some time. You know, somebody who's gone through high school and has had inspirational moments and then noticed the huge flaws in the education system in general. And that I said it was the biggest problem, and then you replied to me saying, replace problem with opportunity. It's the biggest opportunity, the education system in America. And in my essay, you know, I was writing about how we go to school to basically learn recycled information, things that we most likely won't remember throughout our lives unless it was something very inspirational to us, something that really motivated us. But oftentimes it's kind of like, you know, you go in to be prepared for, like, they're not preparing you for anything unique. They don't necessarily view you as a unique individual to build upon your talents and aspirations. It's just kind of a gateway to college. And so all of that time could have been spent really developing yourself and who you are. But in a sense, it's just wasted opportunity. You know, because there's plenty of musicians and great artists who haven't even gone to school. And so I was thinking to myself, you know, what if I was being taught music and I was being taught art throughout my childhood? By now, I could have been a great musician. So all of that time spent was kind of just useless, recycle information. You have bullying in the education system. It's a very unnatural environment. And I feel like there's a lot of wasted potential because it could be run by intellectuals who can act as guides to the youth.
See, so what I heard from you is a large feeling that there was an opportunity cost, significant opportunity cost to your time. You invested a lot of time going through education, and that time could have been spent developing in ways that you didn't. So there's an opportunity cost right there. And then the ecosystem kind of is where I would place the anti-bullying or the bullying thing. And there's a large anti-bullying movement, which I have an interesting take on that. So maybe we can start exploring these topics, and then Kyra, I want you to chime in as you see opportunities. So I think that the way that I see this from, you know, as being like a life coach and working in psychology for the last 8 years, working with adults, is that there's a lot of problems that adults deal with that are a result from not knowing how to deal with their emotions. So when I have clients come to my office and ask for confidence coaching because their supervisor is really critical of them and their supervisor embarrassed them in a meeting or something, right? That's an emotional issue that could have been learned from age 5 to 6 to 18, versus learning and memorizing the capitals of the countries of the world. could have learned how to deal with criticism. Now, the interesting thing, which to me is a huge piece of irony I haven't figured out, is this anti-bullying movement. We're trying to get rid of bullies. The presence of bullies is a huge opportunity to teach kids how to deal with negative energy from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
That's every human being deserves to be taught how to deal with negative energy coming out at them from the outside. And the problem is that no one out there is teaching it. So you have a bunch of adults, human adults, fully grown human beings, adult members of our species, walking around this planet struggling because they're afraid of being criticized and they're afraid of this and that, right? So to me, that's kind of where there's a lot of opportunity. I'll see if you guys have any thoughts on that.
So I'm gonna let Kyra speak, but I just wanted to add that the education system, schools can be places for children who are dealing with negative families and abusive families as a place to kind of, challenge the behaviors that they picked up from their own parents. A lot of these kids, they're going through school with emotional issues. People might not even notice it. And schools should be like that alternative place to kind of challenge a lot of the negativity you're taught at home and, from people who might not have your best interests, unfortunately. I can recall in this philosophy class I had back in college, I think we were talking about ancient Greece and how, I don't know which philosopher it was, it might have been Plato, that suggested something about that children shouldn't be taught by their parents at all, but by philosophers within schools. I'd like to see how that would play out if we had a generation of people being taught by self-actualized individuals, people who could ignite the spark in people. But doesn't look like a possibility.
Well, it's definitely a possibility. That's for sure. Both you guys have been saying some really, really good stuff. Robert, I loved your post about the ego, because it's completely true. You're going into school and you have all of these emotions going on inside you, and they're teaching you sort of the outer stuff that you need to learn. Meanwhile, you're getting bullied, and you, Michael, you said that the whole time that you're in school, you could have been learning to be a musician, and you would have been who you desired and were born to be right now if these people who created and today run the educational systems, if only they themselves would take a look at what hasn't worked in the past, because they clearly have issues, emotional issues. And you think that maybe somebody by now would be like, dude, the educational systems are absolutely, and we need to start doing something about them. Otherwise, we're going to have, like Robert said, full adult humans who have they're pretty much big kids because they have absolutely no experience, no true experience on how to deal with their everyday emotions. Especially thinking about people who perhaps want to astral travel or learn how to lucid dream or anything like that. We weren't taught that stuff. And then people who actually are interested in that as an adult are terrified to jump into the subject because of bullies and because they don't know. So, we definitely, what would you guys think if you guys had an option, right? You guys had a school. What would be some of the main subjects that you would teach the kids? What do you think would be the most important subjects?
You want to go first, Robert, or do you want me to list the two things that I have on my mind?
If you've got two on your mind, go for it, and I'll follow you up.
All right, so I wrote this in the little essay I made this, and I kind of wrote it just so I could, use it as a reference for this discussion over here. But I think the two most important focus would be critical thinking, and we can just also call it philosophy, and ethics. Well, yeah, ethics is also basically philosophy, but things like manners, things like respect, emotional intelligence, and just critical thinking. Because a lot of people don't like to admit it, but a lot of people their perceptions of the world is just based on their own biased point of view, and everybody's got biases. That's who we are, but like we very seldom sit down to listen to other people's points of view, and so that people can come to common grounds on things. Now, I think if people were truly educated in the correct ways, we wouldn't see a lot of the things that we witness in our modern day, because people would find more rational approach to solve problems. There wouldn't be, I don't mean to bring in any real life examples, but there wouldn't be, nationwide riots of people destroying stuff. That wouldn't be a solution to some of our problems. So that's why I think critical thinking and just, it's important for people to come to think for themselves. Essentially, I say people should think for themselves, but you need a moral blueprint. You need a sort of guide to kind of help you get there, I guess.
Yeah, so to piggyback off of that, what was that?
No, it muted for a second, but I hear you again. So,
what would I want to be taught in schools, in the ideal school? Critical thinking, yes, I agree with you on that. Problem solving, yes, and it's incredible what I witness in an average day of people's attempts to solve problems, and just how far they fall short. Now, what would I want taught? I mean, it could be very easily seen by going to YouTube and searching biography Richard Branson, biography, and then Michael Jordan, biography, fill in the blank, any successful person. Donald Trump, right? Now, I know not everybody watching this may like him political wise. However, we can all agree that he succeeded very well in business. Now, you search his biography, you know what you're going to see? Every single one of them. Virgin Airlines with Richard Branson almost going bankrupt. Donald Trump, $9 billion in debt. Doesn't want to, there's a great story in one of his business books. It's a rainy day in New York City. He's $9 billion in debt because of the economy. He owes all this money to bankers that loaned him money to build skyscrapers. And his secretary says you have to go to this banker's dinner. It's a banquet, and it's 5 blocks down the street, and he's running late, so he doesn't want to take a cab, which is going to be stop and go traffic, so he has to walk it, but it's pouring rain. So he's at a low point in his life. He has no money. He's in debt, $9 billion. It's pouring rain, and he said, I didn't want to go, but I did it because it was my job. So he went to this banker's dinner, ends up sitting next to people he doesn't know, starts talking to them, he makes friends. At the end of the night, he discovers that the person sitting next to him that he just made friends with is the banker that he owes the most money to. And they were able that night to cut a deal, make a payment plan, whatever, and that was not the end of his career. And look what happened to his career after that. Now, how did that start? Is because he did something that he had to do because it was his job, even though he didn't want to do it. He got there, he was soaking wet in his suit from the rain, he didn't want to do it, but he did it because it was his duty, his job. So there's an opportunity to teach emotional intelligence and this ability to regulate your emotions. And even if you don't want to do something, you don't feel good one day, right? Should that affect how you go about attacking your day? Should that affect how you're going to, what you're going to achieve in a given day? That is a lesson that can be taught to our youth. You know what I mean? Not this, you know, did you do your homework or not? Oh, you didn't do it? Okay, well then you get a 0 on it. Where's the opportunity to ask, why did you not do the homework? Oh, you didn't feel like it? Tell me what that was like. Describe that. You know, when you feel like not doing something, what, you know, how do you problem solve that, right? That's the real opportunity.
So I just want to say, like they don't really teach you how to. The teachings, in a sense, just a form of authority. Teachers are just authority figures. They teach you how to. Some people might see this as conspiracy type language. They teach you how to stay in line. Okay, but the type of teacher that would kind of like what I wanted to ask you, Robert, and Kyra, you can also bounce off this. Is the type of who would be teaching, because you might, you have those people in schools, those like guest speakers come in. I don't know if millionaires ever go to schools, but what would be the ideal professor? Like, what kind of person would have to teach? Because I don't think like really successful people financially. I don't know if they ever go down to schools and give lectures. I don't know if they do that in schools or universities.
Yeah, I have an example I can talk about, but I want to first pass it to Kyra and get her answer to the question she asked, which it was, what does she want taught in schools? And then we'll go into who should be teaching those things in the schools, right? So,
Interesting.
So Kyra, what would you say as to what should be taught?
I personally think that it would be so helpful to humans to teach the law of attraction, but the correct law of attraction. Like, I'm not talking about like that gibberish, I want somebody who truly understands what the law of attraction is, and we need to learn about it because people do not understand. They just don't. I actually have 4 subjects that I think should really be taught in schools, and that's one of them. The second one is about traumas, because Michael, earlier you were speaking about the kids. It's sort of like an escape for them to go to school, from the parents that raise them at home, which is the reason why they have these issues. I recently just read in a book that actually our traumas come down to us from like 2 generations. So like as far as my mom's mom and my mom's dad and my dad's mom and my dad's dad, I received their traumas. So like, we're going through our days and we need to learn how to deal with these traumas because we don't even know what they are, and it can lead us in like a completely wrong direction. So how to deal with trauma, and then lucid dreaming and astral projection. I personally think that we should just all be learning those subjects because they all have to do with controlling yourself, with exploring yourself, with being fearless, with creating your own life. And that is what we're here for on this earth. We're not here to lose. We're here to win.
Awesome. So let's segue into this question of who should be teaching these things. And that gave me an interesting thought. I think that the inner exploration definitely needs to be taught. And then if we're maybe an equal amount of inner and outer things. And for outer things, what I would say is the ability to problem solve and get things done. And then on the inner side, we have the ability to know who you are and to explore who you are. I think both are important, right? Because if you think in terms of extremes, and if we just project and think of, at an extreme. If everybody just, was lucid dreamers all the time, the country might take a dip in like production, I think, right? But we would need this balance of, well, let's say, for instance, like Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk is another good example. Just search biography Elon Musk. What you're going to find is stories and stories of having to make difficult choices, or having like zero, having bank account go to zero, and then how do you build that back up, things like that. Anyways, and this ties into your question, Michael, about who do you want teaching these courses? Now, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Tai Lopez, but I've become a fan in the last year or two of Tai Lopez, who's a huge entrepreneur, successful business guy, right? And he kind of gets, I think a lot of people's, my first impression of him was, oh, this guy's just, a greedy business guy that has no inner knowledge or whatever, right? Because he made that video of, I'm here in my garage, this is my Lamborghini, and I live in the Hollywood Hills, blah, blah, right? So you immediately kind of label him as like, oh, he's just one of those, business, guys. But I actually took his course, the 67 Steps, which is a very, very famous course. It's $7 a month. It's not much, but you watch these 67 videos he made. They're 20 minutes each, and holy cow, my mind is blown, because he teaches how to emotionally deal with this business stuff. And it really helped me with, trying to run my own business here of the life coaching and whatnot. Every stumbling block that I was encountering and I didn't have an answer, he had an answer in his videos. And a lot of it was these emotional blocks of, being impatient or not understanding the process, or approaching sales from the right perspective of providing value, like these things that allow you to get the job done, right? Because if you have a product, you have to be able to distribute it, well. And those are like these outer skills of business. But then obviously I value so much all of these inner skills of the understanding your own emotions, overcoming fear, being confident in life, right? So to me, I see this inner outer thing. And I don't know, maybe we need different mentors for different teachers for these different disciplines. Maybe one person might be really good at teaching these outer skills of scaling a business, whereas another individual might be very good at teaching kids how to understand their inner world. I don't know. I imagine maybe there would be specialists. What do you guys think?
What do you think, Kyra?
It's Kyra.
That's gonna be the theme. That's gonna be the theme of this movie. Well, right below in the comments, guys, how many times we mispronounce Kyra's name, and we'll see who gets it right. That'll
be funny.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right, so was the question, are you asking who I think should be teaching the subject? Sorry, I got sidetracked.
Yeah, well, what kind of individual? I think, Michael, I think the book you're referring to is Plato's Republic, where he talks about philosopher kings, like running society. And I don't know if he was referring to those people also teaching the youth, but yeah, this question, Kyra,
yeah, like I don't want to cut you off. I mean, there was definitely some flaws. There were flaws in ancient Greece, obviously, but yeah, I mean, they were way ahead of their time in many aspects. Same thing with like the Enlightenment thinkers.
Like I guess maybe the question would be, in the ideal case, how would we find these people to teach the kids of our society? What would you say, Kyra?
You would pay attention. You would pay attention to the kind of person that you would want. And what I love so much about this is that you can tell who somebody is by their actions. And okay, so like when we first met and we were at Grant Cardone's 10X, and you came up to me because you had saw me dancing, and I was like the only one dancing, and I had all of this energy. You know, what class would you think that I personally would teach? You know, like how to be lively, you know, or how to exert your inner emotional excitement, you know, something like that. You wouldn't choose me as a coach for soccer. You know, you wouldn't be like, wow, that girl looks like an awesome coach for soccer. You would pick people who act how the subject that you want taught is. You know, like I wouldn't come up to you and be like, hey, you look like you'd make an awesome football coach. Do you want to like, do you want to come coach football for my school? You know, and Michael, I wouldn't go up to you and be like, hey, I really need an engineer. Can you do this for me? You know, so it's who that person is, and you would clearly need somebody like subject, person, you need it to go together, and you need that to show in that person. Otherwise, it's not, there's absolutely no use, because that person has absolutely no idea what they're doing. They're teaching somebody something that they don't even know. So what do you think, Michael?
Well, I totally agree. I don't really know what to add, except, you know, this is probably gonna go into kind of another little question, is about, you know, a lot of the flaws of the teachers and professors. Like, again, a lot of teachers, specifically teachers with younger kids, they're authority figures. So I would be skeptical as a parent letting my kid go to a school, a strange environment with random people behind closed doors, and not know who they're with. Me personally, when I was a young kid in school, there was two teachers, second to third grade. They found these teachers unfortunately were dealing with, you know, bipolar disorder, and they would actually have like angry outbursts towards us as students. And I remember they would yell at me and, you know, call me names in class. And you know, professors today, like, again, schooling in a sense, you don't know who's teaching you. College, unfortunately, you know, professors, unfortunately, I notice tend to be, you know, they tend to kind of sometimes, you know, put their own, you know, ideologies and beliefs onto students, unfortunately. And it really takes away from the whole idea of education being a place to expand your mind and kind of gain knowledge. It's more of a sense now just an indoctrination center.
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on that. One brief point that we should definitely address is to acknowledge how the current system works. And a good book on that is called Savage Inequalities by Jonathan Kozol, because it explains that schools, the system where schools are funded through the taxpayer dollars from property taxes. So that means that a city that's very poor and where the properties in that city are low value, not a lot of taxes are paid. But you go to a city that's very rich and affluent, where the houses are $1 million, those houses generate a lot of tax revenue. And so the schools in those areas have more funding for their schools, right? So then it becomes clear that the best teachers would, if they want the higher paycheck, will gravitate towards the higher paying school districts, and those kids are already well off, right? And obviously it's not how, it's an oversimplified version of how it works, but that's the current selection process. And then we also have to ask, how does one become a teacher in the current system? Well, you go get your teaching credential, but very often that entails getting a bachelor's degree, if not a master's in education. And is that the best tool? I don't know. Do you want someone teaching your kids who spent 6 years in university, or would you want someone who is selected not by the degree that they earned or the dissertation that they wrote, but maybe someone who has proven themselves based on their ability to inspire others, or based on their emotional management or the emotional awareness, or I don't know, have some, there's got to be, the key word in my mind is selection process. There's got to be some other selection process to identify these individuals who would teach your kids. And I don't know, maybe there's opportunities in the private sector to create a private, I mean, there are private schools. I mean, those exist in our society. There are private schools where parents can, you know, they do have to pay money, but they'll pay a tuition and they can choose what school, like what teachers they want to teach their kids. Obviously, that's not accessible in equal amounts to the different rungs of the ladder of our society, but it's an option nonetheless. So maybe it's an option that needs to be made more accessible financially to the wider population.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I don't really know how to respond to that. What do you think?
I think that Robert has a way of thinking, that's for sure. So are you saying that the areas in which there are larger houses have better funding for their schools and therefore a better selection process with their teachers than as neighborhoods who aren't in a wealthy area? Is that what you're saying? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
See, I definitely can see that to some point, but at the same time, I'm sure like that there's a bunch of like super good stuff in that book, but you can't always, in my personal opinion, I just feel like there may be some super good people in a wealthy school area. There may be, you know, some people where the selection process is a bit different, but there also may be a different selection process like in neighborhoods as well that aren't as wealthy. But I think that I'm trying to think of like schools. I don't think that I would have a valid input on this, to be honest. I don't think I'd be able to have something that where I have enough information in my head that I'd be able to comment on this, honestly.
Well, I think that if we want to take a very deep look at this, if we're asking this question of who is going to teach these, you know, these alternative schools or whatever, these, you know,
Okay.
these philosophy schools or whatever, our ideal school system, we have to remember to what degree are we still hanging on mentally to this idea or concept of school, the old concept of school. Because school as a concept, you know, before we even answer this question of who's going to be teaching it, the concept of school could be completely rearranged in this hypothetical reality we're talking about. So, you know, when, let's say you're a parent, you've got a 6-year-old kid, right? The way that we're used to doing it is like, okay, I have to go drop him off at, you know, first grade, and then I go pick him up at 3 o'clock or something, and they have a whole curriculum lined up for him. That's the old way of thinking. If we are going to explore something new, it could be I don't know, having even different living arrangements where the kid spends their day in the neighborhood, or I don't know. I hadn't developed these ideas enough to discuss, but you get my point that there's so many possibilities of different formats of this education thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed. Like we sort of have this like basic outline of it in our minds from how we all grew up, but there could be something so much different to it, like so super different. That's interesting. Super interesting.
All right, so I'm just gonna, I guess, continue to add that I just think the current education system in general just sets you up for failure, honestly.
It does.
It's like it's a good gateway to college, and people oh, hold on one second, guys. I don't know how to mute.
Yep.
So again, school's just basically a gateway to college, right? There's really not a lot of valuable stuff that comes out of all those years of high school, unless you again meet somebody very inspirational, remember something you learned, meet some good friends. Life lessons, always good. But in a sense, high school, I'm just gonna be completely honest, there was a lot of traumatic moments in school for me as well. And you're talking about that book. I don't know if you wanted to mention the book, because I think that's what you were speaking about earlier, was Millionaire Minds, right? It was from the audiobook.
What about that book?
About how we're raised with the kind of victim mode thinking. And this is something you spoke to me about before. Like, oh, I can never do this, I can never do that. School kind of instills that in you, that you
Mm-hmm.
can't do that. You have to go to school to be a success. Instead of placing an emphasis on you as an individual, as an original human being. And so we grow up with all these victim mindsets. Oh, I can never be like this. Oh, you have to be born with talent. It's like, no, ultimately, in a sense, you have to be teaching yourself stuff. You know, there should be a big emphasis on personal responsibility. And I forgot what I was going to say, but there's definitely a lot of stuff. But school could really be, if they did it correctly, the idea of schooling could really be a beautiful thing, I think. And if it was done correctly, we would see a spike in various great thinkers, artists, musicians. It would be like a new renaissance. I don't know, that's still
Yeah.
new to
Certainly, it raises the question of what potential are we missing out on in our youth right now by allowing education to fall short.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys this. The thing that really confirms, you know, my belief that's set in stone that schooling is essentially just about authority and kind of putting you in place to set you up for failure is the fact that kids who can't pay attention are considered disordered. You know, I was focused and I didn't have excitement over certain subjects in school. I was a child. I didn't want to sit through boring, mundane little lectures from teachers. I wanted to have fun. And they told me I have attention deficit disorder. So I'm basically mentally disordered for not staying in line and sitting there and listening to someone who is getting paid only to lead me towards a direction of failure.
You are making some really good points. I completely agree. Like, I didn't pay attention either in school because I couldn't stand it. I was like, what are you even teaching me right now? And the fact that I'm clearly not the only one, you know, there are many kids who did not want to pay attention in school because they were like, I have no idea what I'm learning. And they sort of instill in you that, like, if you're not like these other good students, that you're not a good person per se, or you're a problem child, or your kid is always causing problems in class, and it instills in
Well,
the kid's mind.
Yeah, I don't want to cut
What
you
do
off.
you have to say?
No, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to. I just think we should, if we're gonna have to say the child's causing trouble, we have to have a more specific example. Like, yeah, they'll demonize someone like me who's not paying attention. Say I'm gonna be like a failure. I'm just like I'm a bad kid because I don't want to pay attention or get with their program. But then there are actually kids who, of course, are troublemakers, and that's, it's so people should.
But still, due to the fact that they're being forced to go down a path that they don't want to go down. And I feel like that has to do a lot with the law of attraction, because the law of attraction pretty much like, dude, just like do what makes you happy. Like, it doesn't matter what makes anybody else happy. It matters what makes you happy. Speak your mind, speak your truth, do what you want, do what makes you happy. And when you're a kid and you can't do what makes you happy, it sort of puts you in this line. You're like, well, I don't have freedom. I can't do this. I can't do that. I have to stay. I can't do what I love all the time.
Do you think I can cut you off again? I feel like I'm gonna forget this if I don't tell you.
Go
I think
ahead.
you're gonna agree with this. There's a saying that every child is actually born a creative genius, and this process of schooling and this emphasis on like just over seriousness, like, and pushing away, like, it's kind of like your inner child is suppressed in a sense, and it's kind of like people lose a part of their soul as they grow older to be like machines. And it's about the suppression of expression, of being able to truly be who you are. And that makes people kind of all the same. And that causes people to not be able to think in different ways. It causes people to aim to be normal. And to be normal is ultimately to just be boring and
Average.
have a mundane failure of a life, unfortunately.
Robert, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that I had a lot of images come through my head as you guys were talking, images, possibility, and even mathematical things went through my head, such as the ratio of teacher to student. I guess an average classroom would be 25 students or something. And I mean, if you're going to really inspire and mentor, I don't think that's enough to have one adult for 25 kids. If you really want to, unleash those kids' creativity and also, cultivate the growth of their soul. So then that presents a funding problem, though. If we're going to pay the teachers for their time and for their effort, so then that money needs to come from somewhere, that's a business problem to be solved. So there's a lot of dimensions to this. I think that another image that came to mind I think there's certainly, to some degree, an overemphasis on the conformity, the discipline, the sit in your chair and don't disrupt. I think that probably got a little bit excessive. I think that let me finish this thought. There is some value in order, and go to any Navy SEAL training and you will see the value of discipline, of doing what your job is, doing exactly what your job and your mission is, getting the job done, getting it done right. And that is not the time to be random and to lose focus and things like that. So there's a time for those skills. Now, I think maybe where the education system gets it wrong is because they take that and they apply it to every situation. Sit in your chair, follow the rules in every single situation. But that's not helpful for every situation in life. It's helpful for certain things, such as maybe Navy SEAL missions, but I think the ideal school system would teach people those skills, how to focus and work in a tight-knit group and follow a very clear and specific mission when needed, but also these other skills of, okay, also knowing when as a human being, it's okay to be expansive and to be very discursive in your thought and to embrace randomness, flow of consciousness or stream of consciousness, to write poetry, to be in touch with your emotions. That is extremely valuable. But I would not want a Navy SEAL writing poetry when he's supposed to be at a sniper post protecting his comrades. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That is a really good point.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, no, because there was like a tons of ideas coming in my mind, like all over the place. I wish I actually wrote some of this stuff down before, like some questions. But no, I definitely agree with what you're saying. When I was talking about, we were talking about expressing ourselves and everything. Of course, there has to be that aspect of discipline as well. And we need people to tell us, again, when we're acting out, when there's a time to be serious and there's a time to have fun, of course. And it again goes into the aspects of discipline and respect, which is important. I was just going to give another example of when it's too far in the school system is, quite a long time ago, teachers used to, I believe, hit their students with like rulers. And I mean, how that's like conditioning kids through violent ways. So, I mean, how do you I think emotional intelligence in itself would just how would we teach being able to be disciplined and also expressive at the same time? Because I mean, we have to be free, but we have to know our limits. We have to know when to cooperate and pay attention.
I think that comes down to knowing your values and knowing your morals and knowing what you truly stand for. And I feel like they all coincide with each other, because if you really truly believe in something, then if you're standing up and you're expressing yourself about it, chances are it's going to come from your heart. And like, it sucks if a kid is standing up for something that he truly believes in the middle of a class, but he doesn't know that those are called his values or his morals. So when we don't understand something, that leaves us in the dark, and it leaves us to misunderstanding, which leaves us to insecurity and leaning on other people to tell us things. So that sort of fine line between knowing when and like knowing when not to, and the right amount of expression, truly, I believe, comes down to your values and your morals and understanding your passion that you come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Of course.
What do you think, Robert?
I think I think we gotta also realize that if we want to be successful as a society, that different people have different skill sets. And so, for instance, and inclinations. So, for instance, Chris Kyle is the Navy SEAL who was featured in the film American Sniper, and he did very well for our military. He saved a lot of saved a lot of lives from our side, and if you watch that movie and you kind of read his story, he's got a certain mindset. Biologically he's able to sit at a sniper post for hours with not much going on, and he can focus, and he can watch, and he can pick up from miles away, see through his little scope. He can find, an insurgent walking out with an improvised explosive device heading towards one of the U.S. military tanks, and he can snipe that person. And it takes a lot of focus because there could be nothing going on for 8 hours straight, and he has to sit still and look through that scope and wait for something to happen. And as soon as something happens, he needs to act precisely and accurately. And not everybody is ideal for that position. But I'll tell you what, our society benefits as a whole, the world benefits as a whole when we put people who are competent in certain roles. So, with that being said, that you can tell I've been watching too much Navy SEAL shows on YouTube. We should let's wrap this up. I did allow us to go over a little bit because we have a good flow here, and we can always do a part 2 if we'd like to this conversation. So let's wrap up with maybe a few questions, a few summarizing thoughts from each of us, and maybe questions that we have that we can address next time. What do you think?
Yeah.
So closing thoughts, Michael. You want to go first?
So we went over a lot of good stuff. I think the greatest question is, because we're talking about how this would be the ideal system of how things would be organized. I think the greatest question would be how to implement this in the first place. I think it ultimately starts with a few people. I don't think with our current system there's like, this stuff is kind of scary, I guess, to some people. I don't see them teaching this kind of stuff in schools, like actual self-development, because then everything would just be turned around. But yeah, I guess the greatest question is how to make this sort of thing a possibility. We might write books, we might make YouTube videos, but a lot of people are oblivious to this. They're influenced by many different places that don't have their best interests. Like, they're watching negative stuff on TV. They're listening to, the negative influences of people who don't have their best interests. How do you come across someone who sparks this way of thinking in your head? Because I was lucky enough to come across people who got me interested in such topics like philosophy and to think about deeper things. And I'm like, if anything, I could say I'm blessed to have come across these people, because if I hadn't, then I wouldn't be sitting here right now having this conversation. I wouldn't be thinking about this kind of stuff. I'd probably, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. I'd probably be complaining and just giving up in life and saying, there's no point in even trying. That could lead to depression for a lot of people. School puts a lot of pressure on teens. You look at the teen suicide rate. I think, I don't remember this. Maybe I think it was in Japan, was the suicide rate among some young teens was in part contributed to the high pressure of kids in school. Like, the education or schooling, I think, played a role in the cause of their stress and depression, and that led a lot of people to commit suicide, unfortunately. And I think that's a factor in America as well. It's this huge pressure we put on teens to do this and do that. You got to become like this, and it's so much wasted time and money could have been spent on finding yourself.
Gotcha. Kyra?
Let's see. Man, I freaking love life. That's probably one of my just ending thoughts. Life is so freaking beautiful. We have the most beautiful, exquisite, amazing minds, and we can do so much with our minds if we were only taught correctly. And I'm gonna tell you one thing: there will be schools that will properly teach kids. I don't care what has to be done. I don't care what has to be done. There will be schools, and humans are going to start reaching their full potentials. So for those of y'all who are scared of humans' full potential, what up? Rock on. And that's that.
Oh yeah, to that. Yeah, so I think you guys both, I mean, you both mentioned like really, really good stuff from your own perspectives and things that are unique that, like Mike, you were saying how you were labeled for not being attentive in class. And, that label held you back. And then, and Kyra, you're pointing out these terms like astral projection and the lucid dreaming that, you know, even if parents could choose to send their kids to any school that they wanted, a lot of parents probably would say, what? Astral what? And they wouldn't even know what that is, right? So we're gonna have to educate parents also. But I think the piece that I would contribute is as true to my, you know, the existence first philosophy that I practice, going deeper and looking deeper at society and even human psychology. There's conditioning for sure going on in schools, and one surface level conditioning is kind of the things you pointed out, Mike, of, you know, in olden times teachers would hit you with rulers. In recent days now we have, you know, sit down, be quiet, don't be ADHD and all this. So there's still conditioning, but the conditioning that is most influential sometimes, in my opinion, is the conditioning that we're not aware of. So you could have a teacher that is teaching you math, and it seems like not really influencing your psyche or your mind or your psychological development, because they're teaching you how to add 2 + 2. However, every day when you show up to school as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever, and you watch how that math teacher enters the room, how they feel about life, how they go up to the board, how confident they are, when they get called, when the principal stops in to say hello to the classroom, how your math teacher responds to a person of authority entering the classroom. That's the conditioning, because now you're taking cues from that math teacher about how to respond to authority. And that's the invisible conditioning that affects all of us so much more deeply than other surface things. So, so for viewers who are watching this, I think that all of us have a presence on YouTube, so all viewers can find us really easily. My channel is called Existence First. Michael, it will probably post this to your channel, so the viewers are probably there already. Are there any other?
Are you gonna put this on Facebook?
What was that?
Is everyone gonna share this on their social media platforms?
Absolutely.
Share it on Facebook. Yeah, share it on Facebook. So, and then Kyra will put your channel stuff, info in the comments, unless you have anything that you want to share right now verbally.
I just had to say one more thing because I love it so much. I have been recently obsessed with subliminal messages. So the fact that you just said this, like, I just love it so much because it's completely subliminal. Like, it's action. It's 100% action, and sometimes it has nothing to do with the words. It's all about the action, and the fact that you just said that is like, it's totally mind-blowing, and I love it. So yeah, that rocked. I love it.
Anything else, Michael?
So I think I'm gonna stop the recording right now. Right?
Okay.
Yep.
Hold on.